It's 11:02, so I guess we can get started. I'll just do a little introduction here. We're fortunate to have today as our guest speaker Rumina Velshi. She's a nuclear engineer, past president of the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, excuse me. Formerly worked at OPG, and she is currently, I believe, tell me if I'm wrong, Rumina, a co-founder and partner at ZettaJoule, who plan to build small modular reactors. Um, Well, just a few little housekeeping things. What we'll do after we get started is I'll mute everybody except Rumina, just to avoid any background noise. And Rumina will talk for a bit, and then we'll have a chance to ask questions either live or in the chat. And Rumina, did I get that right?
Yep, sounds good, Colin.
Perfect. Okay. Now, Rumina, did you want me to bring up my copy of the slides and share my screen? Is that you prefer to
Yeah,
do?
I'd prefer that if that works for you.
No problem. I can absolutely do that. So let me do that now, and then we can get going.
Uh, while you're doing it, let me just elaborate on some of the things
Sure.
you just mentioned, Colin. So first of all, special thanks to both Nazma and Colin for inviting me to speak to you a little bit about myself, my career, and a little bit about the nuclear sector and share my perspectives and reflect on that. So, like all of you on this call, I too am an OPG, Ontario Hydro pensioner. I joined Ontario Hydro in 1978 when I graduated from the University of Toronto, and and worked at OPG until about 2009, and then moved on to other things that I will talk about. So I had a fairly long run at Ontario Hydro OPG and did some very interesting things there, and it really has set the foundation and the trajectory for what I have done since I left Ontario Hydro and OPG. And I have started retirement a few times and then started working again. As someone mentioned at a conference I was at last week, it's like being in Hotel California where you can never leave. And so while I'm kind of retired, I'm still very actively engaged in a number of things. Maybe if we can just go to the next slide, Colin.
Okay.
What I'd like to cover today in the first little while is tell you a little bit about where I have been, especially after I left OPG, and then share with you what I think is happening in the nuclear space, both in Ontario, in Canada, and globally. And then talk about the role I think Canada could and should be playing on the international stage, given some of the unique advantages that we have. And then this deck of slides, which really I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on, it's more just to be a framework and keep me on point more than anything else. I then really want to share a little bit about some new developments and some new things that I have got involved in. So maybe we'll keep this slide on for a bit. Whilst I was at Ontario Hydro and OPG, I did a lot of stuff. I started off as a design engineer. I worked in construction, worked at the Pickering Nuclear Power Plant, and did a lot of very interesting things. Some of the more seminal moments for me during my time at OPG. One was when the Chernobyl accident happened. I was in the nuclear sector. In fact, I've spent especially more than 40 years of my career in the nuclear sector, and that happened 40 years ago, and it really pretty much set the course for the rest of my career, which was very much focused around nuclear safety. And then I was involved with the Bruce transaction, leasing of the Bruce facilities to Bruce Power. The first time that has ever happened in the world where nuclear facilities have been leased. So again, we didn't have a playbook to work with, but we was the largest public-private partnership at the time. So a very, very exciting project for me to have been involved in, because our relationship with Bruce Power was one that we were the landlord. Second, we were a service provider to them. Thirdly, we shared the Bruce site because our waste facilities were there, and they were providing us services there. And most importantly, we were the two, and still remain the two biggest electricity suppliers in the province. And the relationship has had its ups and downs, more recently more up, and greater collaboration and partnership and working together. But it really had been involved in establishing the Bruce Lease Management Office and how that long-term relationship would work out. And then my last big project at OPG was the Darlington site. One was around whether we should refurbish the Darlington units, and then should we be building any new ones there. And so I was involved in the group that looked at doing different assessments of technologies that we were thinking of for the Darlington site for the for building large nuclear units there. And this was around 2008 when the economy was tanking, demand was plummeting. We had a terrible track record with our Pickering air refurbishments. So there was fairly little confidence in the entire nuclear sector at the time. And the province decided that there would be no nuclear new build. And I was eligible for retirement, and I thought, well, try to do something different and something more interesting and exciting. So that was the first time I retired in 2009. And it was soon after that I was asked if I would join the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission as a commission member. I had also joined the Ontario Energy Board as an energy regulator, because once I left OPG, I had a non-compete clause for 2 years where I couldn't work with any of OPG's suppliers and other industry players. So working with regulators seemed like a safe bet. And so it was really shifting gears, working with the regulator and sitting on the other side of the table. When I joined the CNSC, I remember the first hearing I went to was actually for Darlington refurbishment environmental assessment. And there were quite a few interveners who felt I should recuse myself from that hearing because they saw that as a potential conflict of interest, that I was someone from the nuclear sector, very close to it, and how could I possibly be independent? And interestingly enough, the industry wasn't very comfortable with me being a regulator either, because they felt that I knew where all the skeletons were buried, and they weren't terribly comfortable with that. But it was only at that first hearing that it became quite evident that having someone on the commission who understands nuclear, who understands the lingo, who will not get bamboozled by the specialists and the engineers and CNSE staff, that after that first hearing, it was never questioned, and it was really recognized that having someone who actually has the technical background as one of the commission members is a plus. So I was a commission member for 7 years, and then asked to become the president and CEO of the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. And I joined the CNSC right after the Fukushima accident. So kind of another major moment in the whole nuclear history, because whilst Chernobyl really brought home the need for humility, the whole concept of safety culture got introduced there. What Fukushima did, and that happened 15 years ago, was the importance of really being prepared for the unimaginable. Things that we thought were just absolutely almost impossible, that we still needed to be prepared for these most unlikely events. and the need for international collaboration. So I joined the CNSC after Fukushima, trying to work on the whole area of public trust, which was greatly shaken by that accident, and making sure that our facilities were prepared, as I said, to handle the most unimaginable accidents. And so I was the CEO for a little over 5 years, and that was the time when the whole corner was turning for nuclear. Nuclear had been kind of in the doldrums. It was a sector that was on the decline, not only in Canada but globally, for a number of reasons. The Fukushima accident had a huge impact for many countries, like Germany, for instance, who moved away from nuclear, but also with fracking, gas prices had really come down, and the economics of nuclear weren't that solid. And the whole confidence and trust in nuclear was kind of shaken up as well. And so nuclear had been in decline, but in the latter half of the last decade, things were turning around. There was greater interest in nuclear. The demand was going up. Some of the older facilities were getting ready to retire. And it was an exciting time because there were new technologies that were also coming to market, in particular small modular reactors. And so if you think about small modular reactors, think of your mainframe computers, think of your laptop, and then think of your smartphone, and think of the capability that you have in this small thing compared to these large frameworks. And SMRs are very much like that. They are there are these new advanced technologies, less than 300 megawatts of electrical, that makes nuclear very accessible globally. So you don't have to be a large player, like a G7 country, for instance, to consider nuclear. They can come even in as small as 1 megawatts, like a battery size reactors, micro reactors. So there's just greater interest of nuclear. And I happened to be at the CNSC at the time, which was a very exciting time for the regulator as we looked at how do we make sure that we at the CNSC, where we have only regulated can-do technology, are ready to regulate other technologies, that we are in a state of readiness, and that we don't add unnecessary regulatory burden, and also a recognition that Canada does not have all the answers, that we really need to depend on other countries. And so while I was at the CNSC, Canada really was very much a leader in the whole nuclear space. And so for me, these were some of the most exciting times of my career. Our refurbishment projects at Darlington, at Bruce got underway, and even during the pandemic, in spite of that, we were able to deliver those projects on time and on budget, kind of unheard of for nuclear projects anywhere in the world. And so a lot of things have happened to make today nuclear's moment. I don't need to let the folks in this audience know about it. Nuclear has gone through multiple starts and restarts and renaissances, but now it looks like it's here to stay. And demand is going up, whether it's because of electrification, whether it is data centers, whether it's energy poverty around the world, and most importantly, it first started off with, we want a carbon-free source of energy. There were a lot of net zero initiatives. But after the war in Ukraine 4 years ago, it's very much shifted to energy security and less dependence on countries that are not allies. And not only in Europe, but we've seen that in North America as well. And And so for Canada, it is a number of reasons why nuclear is becoming not only fashionable, but it's becoming a central part not only of our energy policy, but of our industrial policy. And so it's a very, very exciting time to be in the nuclear sector. I was at a conference last week, the Canadian Nuclear Association conference in Ottawa. It's an annual conference, the largest nuclear event that we have each year. And I've been going to these conferences for well over 20 years. And I was just reflecting last week on, the first ones that I used to go to, there were maybe a couple dozen of us, mostly men in dark suits. And then if you looked at it last week, just a totally different group of people there. First of all, it was almost 2,000 people, so a huge crowd, a very diverse crowd, diverse in so many ways. So it wasn't just the nuclear experts and the nuclear engineers and the technical folks. It was folks from outside nuclear. It was policymakers. It was the largest supply chain. A lot of students, well over 200 students, again, showing the growing interest in nuclear as a career to follow. A lot more women, not quite 50, but certainly more than a third were women. And same with age. There were young students, but there were also folks like me with white hair, again, showing that for many of us, it looks like our entire career has been bringing us up to this moment, and it's kind of now our time to pass on our knowledge, our expertise for what's coming next. And so, as I talk about nuclear's moment, Canada is seen very much a world leader in so many ways. We are a tier one nuclear country, and by that I mean we've got a full fuel cycle. We've got the second largest uranium deposits in the world. We have our own CANDU technology, one of the best performing technologies. If you look at the top reactors in the world, CANDU reactors are way up there. We have had a very successful track record of operating our facilities. Some of you may remember the terrible 1990s when the Group of Seven came to turn around the nuclear sector in Ontario. And we did turn around, and we have, as I said, the best performing units. Our refurbishment track record is so enviable. The work we do with our Indigenous nations and communities, the partnerships that have been established, the work we do with local host communities, the public's trust in the nuclear sector and support for nuclear is really something truly admirable. If you look at support for nuclear, where existing nuclear facilities are, it's in the high 80%. And even provinces that in the past did not consider nuclear are very seriously looking at nuclear. Alberta just completed a study around public concerns and thoughts around nuclear, and there's a very high level of support. There are concerns, which is to be expected. But if you compared it to 10 years ago, the pendulum really has swung in favor of nuclear. Ontario has very ambitious plans for nuclear. We are the province, as you've heard time and time again, I'm sure, the first G7 country to build a small modular reactor at grid scale. It hit a major milestone last week where the floor mat, the foundation for the reactor pressure vessel got installed, more than 2 million pound mat. So that project's moving really well, and it helps build confidence. So this is going to be one of 4 units at the Darlington site, as Ontario looks at building large nuclear both on the Bruce site and at Wesleyville. So maybe 4,800 megawatts on Bruce C and up to 10,000 megawatts at Wesleyville. So huge dreams and aspirations in Ontario. Saskatchewan, I serve on the board of SaskPower. And we're also looking at building small modular reactors, the same technology as OPG, and recently announced that given the demand that exists not only in Saskatchewan but more regionally in the west with Manitoba and Alberta, that Saskatchewan's also looking at large nuclear. New Brunswick is also looking at building more units, as is Nova Scotia and as is Yukon. And the remote communities, as they look to get off diesel, are also looking at these microreactors more seriously. So on many fronts, as you look at Canada, with our uranium supply, with our own can-do technology, with our track record, both operating fleet, with our refurbishments, with our small modular reactor, with the labs that we have, with the great universities that we have, and a really solid supply chain, unlike other countries in the Western world where their supply chain really atrophied. We're very fortunate that with our refurbishment projects, we have a very vibrant and robust supply chain that sets us up really well for what the future has for nuclear. So I'm involved on a number of fronts. I've, in the introduction, you were told that I'm a founding member and a principal of an SMR company, a Japanese company that wants to commercialize their high temperature gas reactor technology. And we've got a project in Texas underway. So this company is ZettaJoule. I serve on the board of SaskPower. I also recently got appointed as chair of the Supervisory Board of the nuclear utility in Ukraine, Energoatom. And I serve on many other advisory committees nationally and advisors to boards globally. And it's, as I said, a really, really good time to be in the sector. So maybe if we can go to the next slide. I just want to tell you what's happening globally in nuclear, Colin. Thank you. This slide shows where the different nuclear countries are. And you can see the United States, it's got 94 reactors, 97 gigawatts. And is kind of the largest. France is second at with 57 reactors, and Canada is in the top dozen with 17 reactors. But China, that currently has 55 gigawatts, is going to jump and become number one in the next couple of decades. More than half the new nuclear projects underway right now globally are in China, and some of the most advanced ones are in China. Now, the US is got ambitions, but really, when it comes to large reactors, while they want to build more Westinghouse AP1000s, there have been no firm announcements made. France wants to build more as well. And so this is the picture today. We should compare it in 10 years' time. I think the distribution is going to be quite different. But really, the projection is that by 2050, we will have triple, if not more, the amount of nuclear power globally. So, and Canada will clearly be leading the pack. So, Colin, the previous slide again, please. So when we think about what are Canada's competitive advantages, how can we leverage what we do so well here in Canada, what we certainly do so well here in Ontario, how we can leverage that nationally for other provinces that are looking at nuclear, but also globally. And I think our advantages are pretty unique in many ways. Globally, I find that many countries really don't want to work with the Russians or the Chinese, and increasingly with the United States. And so Canada is seen as a very trusted partner, a very competent partner, and one where, if all the ducks were lined up, people would want to choose us. For a number of things, we have a domestic technology that does not require enrichment. We have a regulator that is really admired globally. It's a world-class regulator, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, and is kind of the standard setter globally. We have a supply chain, that I mentioned, that is very robust. We have our labs. We've got a workforce that has so much depth and so much expertise. And it's just our leadership style, our governance style, our way of working in partnerships that make us extremely attractive more globally. And so certainly with, I was in the public service, in the federal public service for a number of years. And, 4 years ago, you could not get any politician in the federal government to even mention the word nuclear. And that has really changed over the last 2 to 3 years, where there is now recognition that not only is this truly one area that the country is a global leader. We punch well above our weight in this space. And there's just so many opportunities for the nuclear supply chain and our workforce globally. Great jobs that can get created, technologies that can get transferred, and helping the rest of the world get to greater energy security. And then across the country as well, energy tends to be a responsibility of the provinces, and yet nuclear is something that's federally regulated. And how do we get the provinces and to work together with the federal government? The relationship isn't always the best, but this is one area where they all are working together, regardless of what political hat they're wearing, and how the first mover that OPG has taken the risks of, how the other provinces can benefit from that, learn from that, and kickstart their nuclear program. I really don't want to talk a whole lot about key risks and challenges. I mean, there are slides in here which will get shared with you, but maybe we can, Colin, just quickly go through those slides, and then I can spend a bit of time on looking ahead, please. So, if you look at what are the key enablers for nuclear growth, I've touched on pretty much all of these. You really do need a regulatory framework that is enabling. Regulators tend to get blamed quite often for taking too long, for adding requirements that just add unnecessary costs. And so having the kind of regulatory framework, frankly, that Canada has, and it is evolving and it does need to modernize, is one big one. Financing remains one of the biggest challenges. Building nuclear is extremely expensive. It can make countries go bankrupt. It certainly has made large companies go bankrupt, and certainly for the first set of units where these are new technologies, where there are execution risks, there are first-of-a-kind risks, there is increased need for the government to provide support to take on some of those risks. And you're seeing some very innovative models around the world around financing. We've talked about supply chain, and the pandemic also showed us how disruption in the supply chain can impact all of us. The war in Ukraine also drove this home. And so the need for greater energy independence and security has come in. One of the biggest challenges is having adequate people. And, as I look around, and I do go to universities quite a bit and do a fair bit of mentoring with young kids, the nuclear sector is one that is hiring. In fact, I just read something yesterday that 200 summer students have started at Atkins Realis this week. So huge demand for workforce, and particularly expert people, highly experienced people, like many of us on this call, who have been there when the last big build of nuclear happened. I joined Ontario Hydro in 1978 when it was the heyday for nuclear, when Pickering B was under construction, Darlington was under design, Bruce was getting constructed, and so on. And we are entering that similar era now. And so, on one of the projects I'm on, the one in Japan, some of you may know Ken Petrianek. He's a legend in the nuclear sector, was with AECL, the Atomic Energy of Canada Limited, and he's one of our advisors. And Ken must be in his 80s, I think. Still the sharpest knife there is in the drawer. And his experience in deploying CANDU reactors globally on time and on budget is so highly valued and sought after. On the right-hand side, you get to social license. The technical part, frankly, is very easy on the nuclear side of the business. Relatively, it is getting that social license. It's getting that public trust and confidence and acceptance. And very close for us in Canada, of course, is Indigenous partnership. It's no longer just consultation and engagement. It really is partnership, so that the rewards of having a nuclear future are shared with them, unlike what has happened in the past. And then the last one is around international collaboration. Unlike many other sectors, nuclear is truly an international sector. There is that recognition that an accident anywhere is an accident everywhere. When something happens at one part of the world in the nuclear space, everyone feels it. And thus the need for the greater collaboration to share openly the learnings, the expertise, work together. And as we get to new technologies, as we get to how do you handle AI, for instance, how do we, I'm sorry, there was just a phone call that kind of disturbed me. How do we work together with these new technologies as we look at artificial intelligence and get ready to not only how do we regulate the use of AI, but how do we actually use AI to make our execution, our reviews, our assessments more effective. So, next slide, please. So, key challenges and risks. Next one, please.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Give me a sec here.
Yeah. Project execution is really the biggest one. How do you deliver these projects on time and on budget? And the first ones, we have not built a large nuclear reactor. Now we're building our SMRs, but it was 50 years ago that the last nuclear project had been licensed here. And how do we, and we've got investors who think more short term and would get very nervous, as we've seen with some of the new nuclear projects in Europe, where they've been more than, or in North America, where they've been in the United States, where they've been more than 10 years late and more than 4 times the original budget. If I look at the refurbishment project and what were some of the things that really resulted in those projects being brought in on time and on budget, one of them is the meticulous planning that went into these projects. It was like 10 years of planning for 4 years of execution. And so it's that level of discipline that needs to happen. We've talked about public trust. There's always the policy risk. These are long projects that last 80 years, 100 years. Politicians come and go. They change policies. And fortunately right now there is support for nuclear amongst all parties. But if that were to change, that would not bode well. And then, the market as well. Right now we have utilities, but with small modular reactors, the market needs are different, the players are different, their requirements are different, and how does the market adjust to that? Waste and decommissioning continues to remain the biggest public concern. Interestingly enough, it's not really safety, though safety is always there, but I think there's greater confidence in that. It really is the waste legacy that we're leaving for future generations, the liability. And while, again, there is a technical solution, Canada is one of the countries at the forefront of a long-term solution to that. That remains a large public concern. And then fuel cycle security, because we still depend on other parts of the world for ensuring that we've got a secure fuel cycle, and there's always a risk with it. Next one, please. So, looking ahead, I think, at this conference I was at last week, the federal Minister of Energy, Minister Hodgson, announced a new energy strategy that's imminent. He said imminent, but then I heard later on, but before year end. So I don't know how imminent it is. But anyway, it's in the works. He did give us an outline of it, and very much, that nuclear is going to play a very central role, will continue to play a central role, not only in our energy policy, but as I said, in our economic policy, and the role that the federal and provincial governments will play in enabling that to happen. The regulatory harmonization is something very near to me. And particularly with small modular reactors, those will only make sense economically if it's a standard global fleet that gets deployed. Historically, each nuclear reactor has been customized. It's a bespoke reactor, and so you run into these first-of-a-kind risks all the time, that there is very little standardization, and so you don't really benefit from economies of scale, and that model is changing. The work that OPG is doing, that SaskPower wants to build that same technology, Poland wants to build the same technology, the US wants to build the same one, that all of them are working together to make sure, is this a standard design that can get deployed and throughout its life cycle managed as a global fleet. And in order for that to happen, all the regulators need to work together to make sure that they're not imposing different requirements. The pan-Canadian collaboration, I've touched on that with the different provinces. They've all signed MOUs. They're all seconding staff to each other, making sure they're working together. And frankly, the last one is for Canada to think globally. And it's difficult if you're in the supply chain, that if you don't have firm orders, if your order book is not strong enough, are you really going to make an investment? So it's one of those, chicken and egg things. Someone has to make the first move, and then the customers will come. And that's what OPG has done with the small modular reactor at the Darlington site. I think we should all take a lot of pride with OPG in the leadership that it has shown by being a first mover. It takes a lot of courage and confidence in doing so. And they're doing it in a very thoughtful way. And as we keep on reminding them, the whole world is watching what's happening at Darlington. So maybe I will stop at that and open it up for comments, questions. I'm open to anything that's on your mind.
Wow. Thank you so much, Rumina, for this detailed overview of the nuclear power's history and how we got to where we are today. This was really illuminating. Does anybody have any?
Yeah.
I'm just going to check the chat. Sorry, I don't see any questions
Good morning,
there.
Rumina. Yeah, good morning, Rumina. I don't know if you remember me,
I
but
do.
we started together in Ontario Hydro in the early 80s, working in the Nuclear Materials Management Department. Anyway, first I have a comment, and then I have two quick questions. My first comment is, as you rightly pointed out, nuclear power is undergoing a renaissance all over the world. And there's strong support in Canada, both with the public, the provincial government, and the federal government. So that's good news. But my first question is that for the SMR, OPG has picked the BWRX 300 design, which is quite different from the standard CANDU pressurized heavy water design. It also requires enriched fuel. Are there any challenges in the licensing of this design? I see that the CNSC has already given approval for construction and construction has started. The second question I have, if I may, is that this BWRX 300, along with other SMRs, is being widely sold to other countries across the world, some of them underdeveloped countries, to be quite honest. And all of them use some form of enriched fuel, whether it's low enriched, 2%, or whether it's high enriched. Is there a concern from a proliferation point of view that this would then change the equation for nuclear power if some of these countries divert this fuel to other uses? So those are the two concerns I have. Thank you.
Kush, I remember you very well, yes, from our NMMD days. Both excellent questions. So around enrichment, so also, and I'm sure you know that our research reactors already use enriched fuel at 19%. So it's not that it's new for us. For the CNSC, when it came to licensing for the Darlington New Nuclear Project, we work very closely with the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission that, the GE fuel has already gone through its licensing process and the assessment, and work closely with them. And as we did our own due diligence and accepted the safety analysis of that fuel. So the licensing, while it was different, we had a lot to work with because this fuel has great history and well known, quite different than some of the other SMRs that are using trisofuel, for instance, where it'll be new with new analysis. But for the BWRX 300, the licensing has not been a particularly big challenge. The enrichment and the longer-term supply of enriched fuel, OPG has made sure that it has a reliable supply chain, at least for its reactors. And that was one of the considerations as they looked at different technologies. And as they were looking at SMRs, I mean, all of them used enriched uranium. So it wasn't, do we pick one or the other? There was no CANDU SMRs in the mix. Your second question on other countries that may not be quite as sophisticated and what's the proliferation risk. I think that's an extremely important point because it's not just the proliferation. I worry about even from the safety side of it. These are sophisticated technologies that require a pretty large infrastructure, expertise, sound governance to work with. And as I've looked and as I advise many of these countries, I'm extremely impressed with the work the international agencies like the International Atomic Energy Agency or the OECD's Nuclear Energy Agency or the World Nuclear Association are doing in providing support, in guidance, in doing readiness assessments, making sure that they're learning best practices. And then when it comes to proliferation, the IAEA has very tough, as you know, safeguard requirements where they do inspections and everyone needs to report. But what this does bring to the forefront is that the international governance model that we have, which was created in the 1950s, maybe updated in the 70s, and so on. How relevant is that today? How appropriate and fit for purpose is it today or in the future 20 years? And I know there are many great minds looking at it. And in some countries, they're actually looking at setting up some regional bodies. So, your technical support organization, one country can't afford to have one for themselves. How can we work together? Same with waste management. And so I think you're going to see a lot of evolutions in this area, but the high standards of safety, security, and safeguards will never get compromised. And that's why this is very much a global sector where every country has to report globally on their performance and on their controls and safeguards.
Wow.
Thanks, Rumina. An excellent overview today, and nice to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ramina, there's a number of questions in the chat. If you like, I can just read them off.
Please, if you would, Colin.
Gary is asking one of the weaknesses, similar to a little bit of what Kush covered. One of the weaknesses of SMRs is for Canada is the need for enriched fuel, and we would not want to be dependent on the US for our fuel. Is anyone considering enrichment or reprocessing in Canada, or are there other reliable suppliers? Any transportation issues around that?
So, 3 years ago, enrichment would never get discussed as even a potential for Canada. That has changed. In fact, I remember having a discussion with Tim Gitzel, who's the CEO of Cameco, where had no appetite to talk about that. I work with Torys LLP. It's a law firm in Canada. Actually, it represents OPG, and we issued a white paper towards the end of last year. And one of our recommendations in there is Canada should seriously be looking at enrichment capability. We already do our own fuel fabrication, and given that we are looking at, we've already made a commitment for technology that use enrichment. And right now, especially for the higher level of enrichment, the world is really dependent on Russia for that. The US is building greater enrichment capability, as is the UK and the US. The UK and France. And France already has it. So I think we've got trusted allies that can provide us with that. But I know that there is some very serious discussions underway right now for Canada to actually consider that down the road. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. David Curtis is asking, where can we find technical information on the small modular reactors? And he's asking a little bit about how it's different from the CANDU system.
Yeah. So, if you look at the CNSC's website, the CNA website, OPG's, all of them will talk about their reactors. And then if you look at Atkins Realis, they'll clearly talk, or CANDU Energy will talk about the CANDU system. And while, some of the core reactor physics is the same, as I look at the CANDU technology, I'm just in awe of our forefathers who came up with this amazing technology with so much defense in depth built in to make sure that it's safe. And I know this is not the question that's asked, but I often get asked, why would OPG not have built large reactors or CANDU reactors at Darlington and why go with SMRs given the high demand? I was around when those decisions were getting made. The demand was not high at the time, and there was very little discussion around large nuclear at all in 2018, 2019, when the decision to go with SMRs at Darlington was gone for. So it really was a decision on new technology. It needs to get tested. No one wants to be first in this race. Everyone wants to be third or fourth, but OPG put its hand up and said, we'll take this on. So the fuel is a part of it, but it's different than the CANDU technology. So for the workforce, there are a lot of changes. It's a boiling water reactor. It's not a pressurized heavy water reactor. So they are significant differences. So you can't really move your workforce from one reactor to the other.
Well, Daryl is asking, is it true that the US got 24% of its enriched fuel from Russia in 2024?
I think it was even more than 24%.
Wow.
I think Russia provided like 70% of the world's enriched fuel.
Wow. Michael Duditz was asking, remember you mentioned our research reactor had enrichment to only 19%. He was hoping to maybe understand that a little better.
Yeah. So our research reactor, the SMRs are like 2% to 5%. Our enriched level for our research reactors that we have is 19%. It is much higher. Yeah,
Okay.
small
And
quantities though. Yeah.
Daryl is also asking, also concerned about the PWR, pressurized water reactor design of the SMRs from an employee safety and environment point of view. Just asking if you can comment about that.
And I'm not quite sure what the concern is.
Yeah.
PWRs are the most prevalent designs that are operating in the world right now. They all have a great track record, both from an employee safety and an environmental perspective. So it's not there isn't a risk of a higher concern with those with the pressurized water reactor technology. I mean, I have said CANDO has got defense in depth, and it doesn't use enriched fuel, so it's got a lot of things going for it. But these others have other things going for them as well. And these new reactors, like the AP1000, has a lot of passive systems, and by that they depend not on operator intervention, but whether it's gravity taking care of things, so it would just shut down in a fail-safe mode. So the technologies are very safe, and in fact, the debate right now, which is highly controversial, is have we gone too far and with little returns, expecting very large investments, and so the costs are very much higher. And similarly on the environmental side, where we know for a fact that the impact outside even the perimeter of the plant, even in the worst case scenario, is negligible. Why do we have such intense requirements? And so I would not be surprised that over the next few decades, those standards get laxed a bit.
I'm just going to paraphrase a bit Rick's question here. He's just asking about the execution of the refurbishment projects, I guess, at Darlington and Bruce. Asking, can you assess maybe how Canada is compared with experiences over in China and Korea, using maybe a cost per megawatt for the refurbishment activities?
So, Rick's question and comment is absolutely right. Um, if you build in enough contingencies in your cost and your schedule, and frankly, if I so I'm on, as I told you, I was on the board of Ukraine, and they have made a commitment to build more nuclear, and while initially they kind of wanted to wait till the war was over, now they're kind of realizing, well, who knows when that's going to be, so we need to start building. And so we're looking at their plans. And one of the other board members with me is Patrick Fragman, who used to be the CEO of Westinghouse Electric. And as we're looking at their plans for building 2 additional large nuclear units and questioning them on their cost and schedule, the dynamics are quite interesting. So from the engineers, it's very much, look, I want to get this project approved. So they try to underestimate what the cost and schedule is going to be to some extent. From the leadership and the policymakers, the concern very much is no one will forgive us if we are over budget and under schedule. So you've got to build in enough contingency, but you still have to be able to make a business case for the project. And so I think that there is that healthy tension, and invariably everyone brings in third-party independent assessors who can actually give a more objective assessment of your costs and schedules. And the argument for refurbishment could very well be, well, of course they were on time and on budget because you were so conservative in your estimates. But remember, these projects were economically feasible as well, and they had to pass that test. The question around China, particularly China, because there have been a lot of numbers that have come out for dollar per megawatt for capital cost, and you see it over the years really coming down. And we're expecting the same. I think we saw the same in the 70s and 80s, how quickly we were able to build our subsequent reactors. I mean, they used to come 9 months apart. And so China is kind of seeing the same, certainly on the schedule side, how quickly they can build. And we feel the same thing, that once we've got the first 3 or 4 out, it'll become more like an assembly line operation, but you just need to get through the first 2 or 3, which will be a lot more challenging. I think, I think our refurbishment is a good test case. The fourth unit was done, I think, 9 months quicker than the first unit, and I can't talk about the cost, but maybe 20% less or so. So it was, you start seeing greater economies.
Very good. I'm going to switch over. Kush has asked a question before. I'm going to switch to a person that hasn't asked yet. Michael Dudas, what percent will the enrichment of fuel in the SMR 300 be?
I think it's less than 5%.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah.
Very small. Okay. And Chao Wee is asking a very future for frame question. Is there progress in nuclear fusion research?
Yeah, so it's way past research now. They're actually getting into demonstration projects and deployment of those. Canada, with Chalk River, is establishing a center of excellence. Stellarex is kind of big here. General Fusion, that was based in British Columbia. So fusion, for most of us on this call, was always something that was 20 years from now. It's always moving 20 years from now. I think the conventional wisdom now, it's maybe less than 10 years from now that we may actually start seeing some energy come out of a fusion reactor. So it's not that far in the future, and as we all know, fusion will be a game changer. So yeah, a lot of
Wow.
progress.
That's amazing. David Curtis is asking, are there considerations of siting SMRs at locations in Ontario other than current OPG sites, as just from the aspect of distributing or improving the reliability of the grid system?
Yeah, so I've looked at the long-term energy plan for the province. Other than the 4 units at Darlington, I haven't seen any for electricity in the plans. What I have seen is maybe the more advanced SMRs that provide high temperature heat and steam for industrial purposes. And so we likely will see those, whether it's in our mines, whether it's in our petroleum, whether it's in the Sarnia region or so. So there's definitely work around that. And then what the federal minister announced last week, which was probably one of the most exciting part about his announcement, was in the Arctic and the use of microreactors. And what was there were a few very interesting things about his comment. One was sovereignty was very important, that this would be a technology that Canada would own the intellectual property rights for, that it would be built for defense purposes first, and then commercialized, and then it'd be used for remote communities for them to get off diesel. And and it's a model that the United States is using as well for their microreactors. They've got Westinghouse and has the eVinci model that will be used for defense purposes first, easier to get through the approval process. And Canada has made a commitment to increase our defense funding, so maybe the financing may be a little easier. And so once it's gone through the defense part, getting it commercialized will be easier. And so I think there's a fair bit of potential and there's a fair bit of ambition around microreactors for Canada and certainly for Ontario as well.
Wow. there's just a couple of questions here. Maybe I'll combine Kush's and Rick's. They're asking, I guess, or concerned there does not commenting there does not seem to be a path forward for new can-do build technology, and uh, uh, asking for comments on would it have made sense to build can Darlington B in Clarington. Any comments on that?
Yeah, so these would be my personal comments. I'm a big fan of Can-Do, so I'll say that right up front. And I also say that if Canada does not build Can-Do, it'd be very difficult for us to sell it abroad. Now there is a lot of international interest in Can-Do technology. Poland is showing interest. The Philippines is showing interest. I mean, there are many other countries. Turkey is showing interest in Can-Do. One because of its performance. Second because it doesn't need enriched fuel. Third because of medical isotopes, which is a huge part of which I should have mentioned before. Canada is a huge leader in that, and where a lot of public trust and confidence comes as well, is it saves lives, and everyone has been affected by the medical isotopes part of the business.
Sure.
And so both for Darlington, for Wesleyville and Bruce C, I know the competition right now is between Can-Do and Westinghouse AP1000, and both have their pros and cons, and everyone is kind of watching with interest. Saskatchewan is also looking at large nuclear, as I mentioned, and they have announced that they want to make a technology decision by the fall of this year. So
Mhm.
probably before Ontario makes its decision, which is also kind of strange, but there you go.
That's
So the minister spoke a lot about intellectual property and sovereignty, and guess who owns the IP rights for Westinghouse? It's not Canada.
wow. That's going to be interesting in the coming
Yeah.
months then. Wow. If you're up for a few more questions, there's lots of interest here. Daryl's commenting that the boiling water reactor has a higher risk of radioactive contamination of the turbine or radioactive release to the environment. Or, sorry, he's saying, I think that's the case. If you could comment on that.
Yeah, it's got a higher risk only because it's of its design. But look, it's gone through a whole lot of safety analysis. It's got BWRs have been operating. The BWR X, the X stands that for the 10th evolution of that design. It's not a new design, so there's a lot of confidence in it. So yeah, I mean, I think as a statement, it has a higher risk, yeah, but it's not a high risk though. Yeah.
Okay. And Bruno's asking just comments on I'm not quite sure what you're asking, Bruno, but the decommissioning of new units. Bruno, I'm
Can
not
you
quite
hear
sure what
me?
you're.
Hi, it's Bruno Bellissimo here. Congratulations, Rumina, on your career and proving that there is life after hydro and that our hydro experience is very marketable.
Yes.
Congratulations. And any thought been given to what happens when these things have to be decommissioned?
Yes, so part of the regulatory process is you have to, when you show up for your license to construct, you have to show the full life cycle. Now, it won't be in great detail, but what you're going to do with your used fuel and your plans for decommissioning the units and the site. And I think most of you would know that there is a requirement that before you load fuel and you start operating the units, you need to start putting money away to help with that decommissioning and the used fuel. So unlike the oil wells that get abandoned, that does not happen with nuclear facilities because part of our regulatory process is very much to make sure you've thought through the full life cycle, including decommissioning and fuel, and you're actually setting funds aside for that. As I said, probably not all, probably a lot more questions than answers, but at least the requirement to start planning for it right up front is there.
So what are they going to do with the fuel? What's the
So,
plan?
Yeah, no, great question, because the Deep Geological Repository that's currently going through an impact assessment is really only for the CANDU used fuel. And but even for DNNP and the used fuel that come out from there, the NWMO has said that they will make sure that they have built the capability for handling it. And so there probably will be additional deep geological repositories that will get set up for fuels from these advanced technologies that get deployed.
Wow. Thanks,
Romina,
Rumina.
if you just allow me one other comment. There's a lot of engineers on this call, and I'm sure most of them would say that from a public policy point of view, having Pickering and Darlington near 14 million people was probably not a very good idea. But I'll leave it at that.
Yep. Hey, I've been at enough commission hearings to have heard that loud and clear. Would we do that today? Likely not. Yep.
I don't see any more questions, but I just ask any folks if anyone wanted to say anything verbally. No, going okay. Well, Romina, this was really informative. I really appreciate the time you're taking to speak to us today, our pensioners. I've learned a lot myself. I will let everybody know that Romina's agreed that we can have this Zoom call recorded, and we'll publish it within the next 48 hours on our YouTube channel. I'll send out an email to all of our registered members when that is in place, or you can certainly just check Hydro Pensioners Toronto on YouTube and find it there. Rumina's
Oh,
also agreed that we can publish the slides deck to our members too. So thank you so much, Rumina, for taking the time. We really appreciate it.
thank you. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank
Bye
you so
bye.
much
Thanks,
for your time,
Colin.
Romina.
Thanks,
Bye bye.
Romina.
Take care, everybody.